Okay, so here's the deal. You just land at the airport. You and your family are exhausted. You get off the plane. You travel up to the rental car company. You sit down. Yeah, you'd ordered your rental car. You're really great. And you're all happy. And then they start asking you a bunch of questions. They start asking you a bunch of questions about, hey, do you want to buy this? Do you want to buy that? On top of the thing of, I wonder if you're going to get the car that you ordered. I don't know. Besides the point, that's not what today's video is. Today's video is about you as a family on your personal auto policy. What's going to be your answer when the rental car people start asking you questions about insurance? Because remember, they're going to be very concerned and wanting to make sure that they take care of their vehicle. And you, being in the state you're in, whether it's vacation or whatever, are going to be like, I don't really know how to answer these questions. So the way you answer them could make a big difference should you have an accident or should the weather turn on you and you have a hailstorm or something like that, or a vandalized vehicle in a parking lot. So today I'm going to walk you through some of the basics. Again, this is in generalities. You're always going to need to refer to your own policy and talk to your own agent about these things here at Shropshire Insurance of Texas. You can call us. We'll help you as well, too. But, there's some things when you're buying a rental car coverage or not buying rental car coverage that you need to think about because there's some gaps in all of it. So the first thing we're going to talk about is what is a normal personal auto policy cover that would translate into coverage for your rental car. The first thing is going to be liability coverage. Typically, liability coverage, the damage that you do to other people's stuff, not the rental car itself, but if you were to hit somebody, other vehicle, run into something, or you injure somebody else using that vehicle, your liability policy and your personal auto policy should transition over for that. Again, this is if you're renting like a private passenger vehicle. If as a family or as an individual you rent big vehicles like big U-Haul trucks, some real expensive classic cars, real unique things, you need to talk to your agent about it because many times those things are excluded on your policy because they're looking at on your personal auto policy renting cars or pickup trucks, things like that. But the people movers, the 12-passenger vehicles, you need to ask your agent because a lot of times those aren't covered. So if you're just renting a normal private passenger vehicle, your liability coverage should move on over there. The other part of coverage that they're going to talk to you about is the physical damage to that vehicle. Now, if one of your autos that's listed on your personal automobile policy has comprehensive and collision coverage, most of the time that coverage would transition to a rental car. Now, of course, you have to read rental car agreements because they start asking a lot of questions. But in general, the physical damage on your vehicle, with the deductible and everything that you have on comp or collision, would transcend over to a rental car. Then there's other things such as medical payments coverage, personal injury protection coverage, and uninsured motorist, which 9 times out of 10, depending on your state and other specific policy matters, they typically transcend over and carry over to a rental car. So those are kind of the basic ideas. But there's going to be times and there's things buried in definitions in the policies about what's a private passenger auto, what's a temporary substitute for an auto. So if you're having to rent a car because your car is being repaired or something, you need to make sure that you understand how your policy handles that. It's good to call your agent and talk to them about those sorts of things. The bottom line is that there's typically coverage inside of your policy for many things, but there's a lot of gotchas. And there's a lot of gotchas because you're dealing with a rental car agreement and you're dealing with things that are not always clear. And so we want to talk about the gotchas right now because this is not the time to sit there and be surprised if something happened, you've been in an automobile accident, you've hit something, and then you find out in a few moments after that there's going to be a gotcha. First of all, you're going to have to deal with it. Most of the gotchas come with that the damage to the rental car itself, and it has to do with the rental car agreement. You got to make sure you know what you're signing on those rental car agreements. That's why you should, when you're renting a car, you need to do it. Pull all that stuff before you rent the car so you can read over it. I know that's not a lot of fun, but you need to get with it. You can get with your agent to make sure that everything's kind of lined up. But when a vehicle is damaged in the rental car industry, not only are you dealing with the physical damage to that vehicle, they're also going to have things many times built in the contracts. There are things called loss of use or diminished value, or administrative fees. These are all these things that can get tacked on just to the damage of the vehicle. And many times your insurance companies are going to balk at a lot of that. They don't like a lot of that stuff. They might not want to pay for any of it or all of it, depending on the contract and the way it's written. And then you could be stuck with those sorts of fees and all those things. And then, of course, a lot of times with the credit cards, they just, with the rental car companies, they just bill your credit card like right there. They adjust it, boom, it's all done. And so, you got to be so careful because there's all these additional fees and charges that can come with the damage to that rental car that you wouldn't normally have if your regular car that you own ran into a fire hydrant and you had to get the bumper fixed. It's not going to be the same in a rental car. So there's a lot of exclusions in these things with like we talked about earlier. Some of the gotchas could be you go out and you rent a really big U-Haul, or you rented a private passenger van or some exotic or high valued automobile or motorcycle or box truck, which people have. A lot of times those things are excluded. So you need to look at what in the world do I need to buy the coverage for the rental car company for those things. You can't just always go, hey, my personal auto policy is going to take care of everything. So you got to make sure that you deal with that. Some other gotchas, or if you're going to use that rental car on business use, remember this video is about personal auto. This is your personal, your family auto policy. This is not a commercial policy. And there's some restrictions inside that personal policy about if you're using a rental car for business use. Some of the policies can restrict or even exclude coverage for those sorts of things when you're renting a vehicle. Yeah, you don't want to find that out at the time. Of course, if you're going to rent a vehicle outside of the U.S. or Canada, you really have to be very careful because you even want to read your policy to make sure that Canada is covered in that. Because a lot of time when you leave the U.S. and for sure when you leave Canada, there's no coverage. Mexico, no coverage typically on your own personal auto policy. So if you take that vehicle across the border, that's a gotcha. You're going to be in a lot of trouble there. So you typically need to purchase Mexican insurance. And even in Canada, you need to talk with your agent before you go anywhere outside of the United States. What in the world, if any coverage you'd have on your personal policy? Because you don't want to be caught on that. That's just not fun. And you don't want to have that. And there may be some other gotchas that your agents can tell you about too that you got to figure out. And you have to remember as well that even if your comp and collision deductible from your policy kicks over and pays for the damage to that rental car, you're still going to have your deductible. Those things still apply. Can you afford that deductible? Is that something that you want to take on the claim? So you really need to pay attention to that and make sure of what your policies will do for you before you rent that vehicle. Now, as you've stumbled up to the counter, and as we mentioned earlier, the rental car people are going to talk to you about some things that they're going to ask you to buy. Again, we have really no opinion on these coverages because some of them can be really, really good, but it's an individual decision, and it also depends on your personal situation. That's why you get your contract before you sign the agreement. You talk to your agent before you go on your trip because you're going to need to decide if you're going to want to purchase these coverages. The first one that they'll talk to you about a lot of the time is either called LDW or CDW. Those usually stand for loss damage waiver or collision damage waiver. That's going to be typically anything physically that happens to that rental car. It's not insurance. It's an agreement that you're having with the rental car company that if something happens to that car based off the agreement and the extra amount that you pay on the rental car, that is going to be taken care of by the rental car company. That also is a way to, when we talked about those loss of use fees and administrative fees and all that, all those go away if you purchase that coverage. Personally, myself, I've had to use this 3 times. It sounds like maybe everybody's chasing the insurance agent, but I've been in 3 different instances where I rented a vehicle and it was either parked in a covered parking by valet. It comes out, it has scratches on it. One time we got caved in the side in a mall at a parking lot. On that situation, I was able to return the vehicle, drop off the keys. They put me in another car, and I walk away. I didn't have to deal with all the claims, information, and all that. So since those things just happen to the vehicle, it's the cleanest and simplest way to take care of the damage to that vehicle that you're renting. I didn't have a deductible. Again, they do charge you extra for it, and I know everybody's trying to cut the cost, but when you look at all those extra charges that they can throw on there that your insurance carrier may or may not even want to pay for, that's not a bad way to consider it. They'll also talk to you about additional liability coverage. So, in your personal auto policy, you need to get with your agent and go over your liability coverages limits, because those are really important. We always recommend buying as high as limits of liability that you can afford, just because of the amount of claims that are happening out there and the severity of claims. But also, when you're renting these vehicles, they'll ask you if you want supplemental or additional limits. It's a personal choice for you. If you carry a lot of very low limits, it's something you might want to consider. If you're renting, again, one of those U-Hauls or a 12-passenger vehicle, or one of those vehicles that your personal policy might not want you to rent and says we're not going to cover it, you may need to buy that supplemental liability coverage so you have liability insurance. You just want to make sure that you go through your own personal stuff to figure out what's going to be the best deal for you. And then they talk about personal accident insurance and personal effects, and those kind of spell themselves out, and you can read through those and see. But the main thing that we really kind of look at that we're always concerned about is the liability, and then, of course, the damage to that rental car vehicle and how much it could cost you to come out of your pocket. So I have people who say, hey, I've got credit card. My credit card has physical damage coverage on it, so I'm just going to use that and not purchase the LDW coverage or anything. That's purely a personal choice. It's totally up to you, though, to make sure that you understand your credit card agreement. By all means, there's no way I know what all credit card agreements say. Some may be great for this, some may be not so great for that. You need to address that. You need to get out your rental car agreement. You may need to pick up and dial that 1-800 number to speak with somebody at your credit card company to give them the scenarios of, if I rent this vehicle and I use your credit card and I run into a pole or I run into somebody else, will y'all pay for the physical damage of the car that I'm renting? Make sure that those benefits are there before you go. You don't want to hedge your bets on hoping that it is. All those agreements with credit card companies have exclusions, they have addendums, so you're going to have to get with those folks and make sure, if you're going to rely on that, that the direction that you're going to go is going to be the best for you. So when does it actually make sense to buy the physical damage coverage that we just talked about on the rental car through the rental car company? There's just a few ideas to this. Again, it's personal opinion. But if you don't carry comprehensive or collision coverage on your personal auto policy, there's no coverage on your personal auto policy at all. So if all your vehicles just have liability coverage and all that, you're going to need to carry the loss damage waiver, or you can talk to your credit card company, but you're not going to be able to fall back on your personal auto policy for that. And remember, those fees and everything are still there, the administrative fees and the loss of use fees. Again, if you're going to go to Mexico and other countries like that, you need to buy the coverage either from the rental car company, or you need to get with an insurance agent that sells specific coverage for that country, who understands your needs, and get those angles all taken care of. I would say then that the other side of it is, you might want to be like me. You don't want to deal with the hassle of filing a claim. On those vehicles that I had, I do purchase the LDW coverage as a personal preference, because I like to just, if I take that car back and they walk around the car, they find a scratch, something happens, I hand them the keys, I tell them goodbye, I thank them for everything, and it's been great. And on those times when I was in the middle of a trip and I had a boom, well, guess what? I got it back to the rental car place. They gave me keys to another car. I jumped in. Trip was on the way. So some of it's for convenience. Sometimes you don't want to have it on your record if you have something like that, because any claim that occurs somehow finds itself inside your premium on your personal auto policy. So you might want to decide, you know what, I'm just not going to even mess with that. If that happens, I'm going to keep it over here. Those are some reasons why you might want to buy the loss damage waiver coverage. And then again, you're renting a vehicle that's not going to be covered underneath your auto policy, like maybe a big U-Haul or one of those 12-passenger vehicles, you definitely want to look at that as well. So there's just a lot of things going on with renting cars that you need to kind of take care of. So here is kind of a simple checklist for you that we would like to give you, that first of all, to kind of think about the things you need to do if you're going to rent a vehicle. First of all, you need to get with your agent or pull your policy out, verify your limits and deductibles, make sure what coverages that you have. Do you have collision? Do you have comprehensive? Are there things in your policies that could exclude the vehicle that you're thinking about renting as a personal use? What country are you going to? Where are you traveling? Get all those things out and decide in advance before you walk up to that counter. Am I going to need to buy any coverages or not? That's what I like to do. So you go through and you do those things, and you kind of keep all your receipts, keep all your bills, be prepared when you walk in there. That's going to be the best way for you if you're going to rent a vehicle on how to answer these questions. That's how I'd recommend that you go about dealing with it, is you pick up the phone call first, call your agent, tell them what your plans are, and let's get that policy together and let's see. And if you need any help with that, you can always contact Shropshire Insurance of Texas. We'd be glad to help you, and we hope you have a fantastic day.